2020's Troy built from Home Depot.
Today's video, we're going to be talking about how your grandfather would be disgusted with today's offerings. Stay tuned. Alright, Brett, so today's video, I thought it'd be fun, because I did just do a video on nostalgia and how a lot of people get nostalgic about garden tractors, and I think one of the top people that a lot of people probably thought of was their grandfather. Because let's be honest, I would say men in general probably are more likely to buy and use garden tractors, especially back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, than probably women were. And they're of the right age where they would have been in an age that they could buy a brand new garden tractor at that time to be able to afford one. But let's talk about why they would be absolutely disgusted looking at the offerings on today's market.
By offerings, you mean lack of offerings, right?
That's absolutely true. When we say offerings, there really aren't any garden tractors to speak of on the market that I can think of. Simplicity's now out of business. Ingersoll is on a way to make a comeback. I know there's plans to revamp the line. There's a new owner and they're planning on getting a new line of machines out, but it's just not quite at that stage yet. It's not ready. I mean, I guess you could argue some of the John Deere offerings would be considered garden tractors, but all told, there really aren't very many garden tractors on the market, especially not like when you think back to the 60s, 70s, 80s, when our grandfathers would have been buying these machines. You had all these different options of different places you can go, different dealerships, different brands. Imagine being able to walk into the showroom floor back in 1975 and pick which garden tractor you wanted to take care of your property needs.
It really would have been amazing to go in and see Simplicity's, Cases, Sears, John Deere, Boland's, Wheel Horse, Cub Cadet. See all of these different tractors with all of these different offerings. Whereas nowadays, if you go into a big box store, you are going to see some of the worst quality rubbish I have ever seen. Ever. And this is coming from someone who used to work at a small engine repair shop. I had to deal with these things all the time. They were terrible.
I'll tell you what, it is a cold night, it is windy, and with that wind chill, it really brings that temperature down. I think the real feel temperature right now is like 14, 15 degrees Fahrenheit, so absolutely brutal out there, but here we are in the garage. Great day to talk about this topic. So when your grandfather was around, he would have been used to American-made quality. Things like this Maglite flashlight. Things like this Buck 110 folding knife. I think this might be the most popular folding knife ever made. You can still buy the Buck 110, and I believe you can still buy the Maglites. But the point is, these are quality made, American built items that are made to last and be passed down generation to generation. And garden tractors were no different. You like that?
I agree.
You went so over the top. I had to try so fucking hard not to start laughing. So hard. You know, Brett, a good man always carries a pocket knife. Show him your pocket knife, son. That looks like a key, son.
You could probably should have something with like this if you wanted to. I mean,
let me know in the comments. I've actually been considering making a video about buck knives, the history. As you've probably seen in other videos, I really enjoy getting into the history of brands, telling their stories, showing some of the pictures from times gone past that we just don't see here anymore in 2025. But going back to garden tractors, how would you envision it would go if my grandfather were alive? Now keep in mind, my grandfather would have been born in 1911. If he was alive, he would be 114 years old right now. How do you think he would react to seeing today's offerings in the garden tractor world?
I think he'd drop dead in the spot. That's really what I think. Because what you gotta remember is that back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, even into the 90s, to be totally honest, there were several brands making genuine garden tractors. Whether that be Case Ingersoll, Sears Craftsman, Simplicity, John Deere, Cub Cadet, Wheel Horse, Boland's, Power King, Ford, Jacobson, even like Aaron's and Toro dipped their feet into the GT ring. Nowadays, there are next to zero offerings for a true garden tractor, and there are no garden tractors that look anything like what our grandfathers would have seen back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
I mean, if you look at the offerings, it's places like Tractor Supply, Lowe's, Home Depot, you know, those kind of places. You look at the axles, you look at the frames, you look at the tires, and you look at all the different components, how thick the steel is and everything. And then you compare it to one of these vintage machines. Now, these are not old for vintage machines.
Oh.
The machine Brett is sitting on would have been from the 1990s, and this would have been from the 1980s. So I would say, you know, these are newer for vintage machines, but even these two machines are heads and tails above the crap that you're gonna find at the big box store here in 2025.
So,
Hold on, Brett, before we get going, let's put our gloves on. It's cold out. A good man always carries a pair of gloves on him. Throw your gloves on for us. No gloves, no knife. What the heck? You know, I'm gonna have to really reconsider some of the things I've taught you as a father here. I'm gonna put on I believe these are Wells Lamont Handy Andes. These are some nice gloves, nice color, so you don't lose them easily. And they sure keep your hands warm in these cold nights. So what were you saying, son?
That, as I've said in previous videos, I used to be a small engine mechanic. And as I've also said in previous videos, he had no more than the amount of GTs in this room on the entire lot.
How many tractors would you guess?
200 to 300, I'd say.
So out of 200 to 300, he had maybe five to six that were actual true garden
GTs,
tractors.
yes.
Wow. Why do you think that is?
Because they didn't break. And all of them
Or the owners that had them maybe didn't want to get rid of them.
That could be true too. And they were all picked dry. That every single part that you could use off them was taken. That they were basically just the steering column with like the control panel, I guess you would say, and like the frame.
Yeah.
That's it. No axles, no engine, no tranny, no hood, no grill, no lights, no nothing. Just the bare bones.
A lot of the modern garden tractors, I say modern garden tractors with some real, kind of loose language, because they're not garden tractors, they're ride-on mowers. A lot of them, you can't service them. They had sealed units, so they're not meant to be serviced. They'd have replaceable parts that are not meant to be worked on. They do not have the ability to have a three-point hitch or any way to engage the ground with an implement. A lot of them don't have any way to bolt on wheel weights, because the manufacturers know if you put wheel weights on it, you're very likely to snap that pencil thin axle. They're just not meant for ground engaging work. They're not meant for real work. They're not meant to do chores around your property like these old beasts are.
Well, and that's the thing, is that he had his yard organized by era. She had these 5 or 6 GTs from, I'd say, the 50s or the 80s all together. And then you had a sea of crappy box store mowers from the 90s and 2000s. And all of them were near complete, probably only 1 or 2 little things wrong with them. But it wasn't worth his time or his money to fix them, to repair them, to sell them again, because whoever junked them would rather just go to these big box stores and buy another $2,000-3,000 mower to get 2-3 years out of, to then repeat the cycle. That they don't want to fix things. They want the newest, the latest, the greatest, no matter how poor that really is.
The manufacturers, for sure, I don't care what anyone says. They purposely make them cheap, knowing they're gonna break, and you're gonna have to spend more money buying a different machine a few years down the road.
1,000%.
They used to actually care, and people have commented on this in my nostalgia video that I referenced. If you want to see that video, by the way, please click up here. But people made comment that manufacturers actually used to care about the customer. They wanted you to have the best experience with their product possible. They wanted you to rely on it and, you know, really depend on it and know how rugged it is and tell all your friends about it so they would also buy one. Now, all they care about is the shareholders' profits and making the maximum money, and they could give two craps about you, the customer. So, for me personally, I would never buy a new machine that's, you know, garden tractor, really just a ride-on mower. I would much rather buy an older machine that's really built well, and you're going to end up spending less for that used than you are for one of these piece of crap new machines.
That's a little better. It was tilted like that way. I think a perfect example of the quality difference is when my father was putting that phone up there for this shot that we are taking right now. He had stepped on the hood of his 1971 Sears SS14, which is 54 years old, about to be 55. It didn't dent, it didn't crack, it didn't bend, it didn't break. It just took it like a champ and kept on going.
You trying to say I'm fat?
No, I'm trying to say if you were to take 200 at least pounds
215 pounds, I think, roughly.
Okay.
Really weigh.
and put it on the hood of a modern garden tractor in as small of a space as your two boots are, you would crush it instantly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You get a big dent in the hood.
You know?
Like I was saying earlier, the metal used, even on the hoods, just the hoods. If you can even find a metal hood tractor now, that metal is going to be, it's going to be crappy metal, probably from overseas, so it's going to be a mixture of different metals. It's not going to be all steel. It's going to be a much thinner gauge than a lot of these old hoods. So, I agree, it's absolutely going to crinkle
And also,
like a bag of chips.
Sears SS14, 54 years old. I know my father isn't the only person out there that still loves for these tractors, still cares about them. I'm one too. I know we're not the only two. Can you tell me honestly, 50 years in the future from now, that someone's gonna be like, oh, 2020's Troy built from Home Depot. They're gonna restore it and care about it? No, of course not.
You know, Brett, I think that brings up a good point to wrap up the video. That's why we do these videos. A lot of the reason is to keep the spirit of these old machines alive, so the younger generations like Brett that maybe don't have a father that's into garden tractors like he does, and don't teach them about these old machines. We can keep them alive and keep their memory going so future generations can appreciate these old beasts of the past.
That is the goal with these videos, and I hope that we are achieving it.
So if you do enjoy these kind of videos, please let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you
Next time.